So I'm Kelley Roy. I'm the owner of ADX and Portland Made, and we also now have a scholarship fund called the Make It Fund. And I'm not going to go into super in-depth about ADX or Portland Made, but more into this real estate conversation that's happening. So this is a concept that I've been thinking of after 3 years of owning ADX. ADX is what's referred to as a makerspace. But unlike a lot of maker spaces, we are connected to local economic development, doing a lot of workforce training. We provide small spaces for entrepreneurs to start launching their products and their ideas. It's just, we share tools, we share space, we share a brand and marketing platforms. And then Portland Made is acknowledging that there are many other things going on in Portland outside of ADX in the food industry, tech, fashion, and so that's a brand for Portland, and by Portland we mean the whole region, including Vancouver. And it's doing a lot of the same things that SF Made is doing, and we consulted very early on with Janet. The model is a little bit different, and both of the companies are for-profit, LLC, single member, owned by me, and that's mainly because I want my businesses to be really nimble and adaptable and able to move quickly. And so then we partner with a lot of nonprofits to be able to accomplish the things that we want to accomplish. So OMEP, Impact Northwest, Mercy Corps Northwest. There's just so many nonprofits in Portland to partner with. So instead of creating another nonprofit, we're just partnering with them. So the industrial Grange is really acknowledging that manufacturing requires space, physical space and tooling, capital investment. So there's a lot of money that goes into real estate and tooling. And as everyone knows and hears about Portland, no matter where you are in the world, everyone is acknowledging there's something going on in Portland. There's this incredible creative force, and it's been building over the years, and it's across a lot of different industries. And so our ADX is really meant to be there as a resource for people working out of their garages and basements, and giving them a platform to launch their ideas. So we've had there's a lot of success stories here in Portland, whether it's Stumptown or Grove Made or Zen Bikes, Leatherman. So there's a really wide range of young businesses, small businesses, more established businesses. And Portland Made is really focused on kind of the artisanal aspect of manufacturing. So we're not necessarily dealing with the Daimlers and the Gundersons and the kind of bigger manufacturers. And we really are into this concept of economic gardening, growing what we have here in Portland, rather than industry chasing, trying to get industry to come to Portland and giving them tax breaks and free rent and all that stuff. We really want to be part of the movement of keeping Portland and helping the creative people that are here grow their companies. And because we have some really cool industries here. I mean, beer, bikes, food, I mean, who doesn't love all that? It's amazing. So we created Portland Made. It's a local goods collective, meaning that it's across all industries, and it really is meant to be kind of a cohesive brand and a storytelling platform. So if you go to portlandmade.com, you can read stories about the people, their products, you can watch videos about who they are and why they got their start. So again, there are just ideas everywhere happening in basements and garages, and but a lot of people don't know how to take a product to market or how to run a business. And so we're really trying to, so operating in isolation is not really going to get them very far, but coming to a space like ADX where they can work alongside other entrepreneurs and access the space on a cheaper way. So rather than renting their own space, they can come to a shared space and save money on space and tooling so that they can get their idea off the ground. They can also access business resources, business consulting, and like I said, we partner with a lot of different nonprofits around the city so that they can, because there's tons of them. Mercy Corps offers a lot of resources, the SBDC, OMEP for lean manufacturing. So rather than trying to do everything ourselves, we are leveraging those partnerships and directing people to those resources that exist. So again, just leveraging. There's so many resources here in Portland, and bringing them together through quality brands and space and shared tooling. There's also other incubators like ADX for other industries. So there's Pi for tech, and Kitchen Crew is for food industry. The Oregon Storyboard is fairly new with digital and media. And then there's Portland Apparel Lab. They haven't quite gotten off the ground yet, but they had their first kind of coming out event about 2 months ago, I guess, at the Museum of Contemporary Craft. And they're really meant to be kind of an incubator for the fashion industry. I can see this happening for bicycles, for brewing. You know, there could be an ADX-like space for all of the different industry sectors here, because it really is a necessary kind of place to start. So again, leveraging all of that through a collective brand. So really bringing all of those industries together under a common brand to educate consumers. So when I'm talking about this kind of local artisanal manufacturing movement, I kind of it's like the food movement in the last 10 to 15 years, where people are going to farmers markets and learning, you know, who their farmers are, who's growing their food, how they're growing their food. You can go out to the farms. There's even spoofs about it on Portlandia, so you can know your chicken's name and how he grew up and whether or not he had friends or not. Anyway, educating consumers is a big part of this. Why should they pay more for locally made, handcrafted goods? Well, because there's people behind it, and by buying local, you keep money in your community. So Portland Made is a membership-based. It's $10 a month for members, and we're across all industry sectors, and it is a lot about storytelling and getting people to understand who the makers of these products are, so that they feel more compelled to buy local. We've in only a year, we had 126 members, and then within the last 6 months, we're now over 400 members. So this kind of force is building, and we've been working with the Portland State University with Charles Hain. He wrote a book called From Brew to Bikes, Portland's Artisan Economy, and he's doing a lot of studies and research, not only about ADX members, but also Portland Made members. And we have similar measures of success through jobs and total revenue generated. And we're fueled by Supportland. So does anybody know what Supportland is? Yeah, so it's a piece of technology, right? I think they now have an app, but they used to just have this card, and whenever you buy local, you're swiping your card at local businesses, accumulating points, so kind of like a loyalty program, and then you can cash in those points at other local businesses. So it's really trying to keep money flowing within the local economy. And then the concept of shared manufacturing facilities. So it was mentioned earlier that there's like this first space, second space, third space. So their first space might be your garage, and the second space might be a place like ADX. And then where do you go from there? So we've really been thinking hard about what that looks like. And again, the survey results just came out last month. We just presented them on Manufacturing Day, which was on Friday, October 3rd. We had representatives from all levels of government there. They're really excited. Everyone's excited about American made and local made, but it turns out it's much harder to do if you don't have a trained workforce and you haven't preserved your manufacturing infrastructure. So these are a lot of the conversations that we're having with the powers that be. But anyway, of the 126 members that we had when the survey was done, we employ over 1,000 people, and we generate over $263 million in revenue. So, and our membership is now tripled. So you can kind of see, and we're hoping that people see that this is kind of a very strong economic force to be reckoned with, and that the policymakers need to pay attention to what's going on, because as a single owner of business that maybe employs 5 people, I feel slightly powerless. But if I'm part of a collective and I can give these numbers and say, this is who we are and this is what we need, then hopefully people will start listening. So the industrial grange is this concept, so it's kind of like back during the Depression, right? You create these granges, these collectives, shared spaces. So it's just acknowledging, so here are all the people working in their garages. And then you have these incubators that are providing resources. There's additional resources. And so the concept is you have these shared manufacturing facilities. So these are larger buildings. We're looking at buildings that are 40, 50,000 square feet because they're cheaper and they generally have the type of manufacturing infrastructure that we need. Power, plumbing, major amounts of distributed electricity. So all of the infrastructure that's needed, and just connecting the dots, connecting the people to these resources, no matter where they are in their process. If they're ready to jump into 1,000 square feet, they can. If they need more of a 10 by 10 space and an incubator, they can do that. So this is really about connecting people with the incubators and with shared manufacturing facilities. And it's really, in Portland, it's a conservation move. So Janet mentioned in San Francisco, the prices are really high, so people are moving to Oakland. Well, there's a lot of people moving to Portland, and there's a lot of investors speculating in Portland development, and it's really changing the flavor, specifically of the Central East Side, which is where ADX is and where a lot of these artisanal manufacturers are. So the Industrial Grange is saying, let's protect these spaces that are historically manufacturing spaces and have the infrastructure, but are becoming places where new companies can come in, whether it's Basecamp or Grove Made or Plywork or Spooltown or Make It Made Here, and who's that other one? That's Mudshark Studios. So a lot of different types of industries working with a lot of different types of materials, but they all need this manufacturing infrastructure, and we have it. So we need to preserve it and protect it and not give it over to office space, or a lot of companies want to move into warehouse space because it's cool. But we need that infrastructure, and there's a huge amount of money and investment that's gone into building that infrastructure and playing to David's point of people want to be close to where they work. They want to work in the Central East Side, and they want to go to the breweries, and then they want to go to the restaurants, and they want to bike, and they want to bike around the river and just have access to all of that. So it's very important that we preserve and protect that. So I think the benefits are just supporting a local manufacturing industry across lots of different sectors. You're creating these jobs, and like I said, ADX and some of these other incubators are providing workforce training, and that's really important to help support these companies as they grow. Elevating the Portland brand, so we really want Portland to be known as, internationally as a place where high-quality manufactured goods are created, and just growing Portland businesses in a holistic way, and keeping that money in the local community, and we can do that through the Portland network. Providing those living wage jobs. Everyone's talking about providing living wage jobs, but there isn't really a lot of skills training out there, and I think manufacturing kind of has a bad image. People have this image of manufacturing as like dirty smokestacks, black lung, but it's really, a lot of these artisanal manufacturers are, small companies. They have there's a new set of values that they're operating under around giving people great, paid time off and healthcare benefits, and it's a real kind of family environment in a lot of these companies. And it's really exposing a younger generation to these companies and what's being made here, so that they kind of see the new phase of manufacturing. So that's what we do through partnerships with Impact Northwest and Work Systems Inc. and some of the other organizations that work with young people in our region. Let's see, so, the result is, if we can keep all of that thriving and connected, then we build a more resilient economy, rather than chasing tech and chasing the latest and greatest kind of big investment that requires venture capital. We're really building a stable economy. When you invest in physical space and tooling, it's a huge investment, and more than likely that will stay for a longer term. And it really supports the things that I think we care about here in Portland, the industries that we all love to support. So that's kind of the message I keep saying over and over, is we want to be Portland. We don't want to be the next San Francisco. There's a lot of tech talk going on right now, and the city's really enamored with the tech industry right now because it's big money. But there's really a cultural flavor to a lot of these more artisanal manufacturers, and we really want to support and acknowledge those. So that's what the call to action. Join the movement, support the cause, work together. And anyone can join Portland Made we're all consumers, so supporting locally made goods is a good thing. And then if you want to come down to ADX for a tour, we've had over 75,000 people from around the world tour our space in only 3 years. A lot of folks from Japan come through our space, a lot of folks from South America. And then we've had people from all over the world inquire about our business model and how we've made the business work, and they want to have, makerspace in their community, but defining makerspace and trying to give it a kind of higher impact in a kind of economic development way is really what I'm hoping to add to the conversation as people see this movement developing in their communities. So that's that. I also have puppy brain. I just got a puppy and I'm really tired and slept. And so if I talked really fast or like all over the place, I guess that's why questions happen. So are there questions? Yeah?
I have two questions. One is you used the word ecosystem, and I'm wondering whether, but you didn't say anything about supply chains. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit, and whether there's been any attention to sort of dealing with the supply chain from a local point of view.
Yeah, well, again, a lot of our local partners help with supply chain things. The Oregon Manufacturing Extension Partnership works with a lot of local manufacturers on supply chain. But a lot of the companies that we work for, they source locally, and they're trying to, like Crown Lab, they're building high-end architectural sliding door hardware. And, I think a large majority of their materials are sourced locally, again, for a lot of the reasons that David mentioned and that Janet mentioned, is just this quality control. It's easier, easier to work with people when you can sit down and meet with them and troubleshoot, and you might need small runs. But certainly, those are many of the issues that Janet mentioned of what the companies that are part of SF Made need as far as, that information about real estate, information about supply chain. And so we're really there to try to connect people to all of those resources that are out there.
Second question is, could you be a little more specific about the Central East Side? In other words, what's your take on what's actually going on there and what the prospects are for the next
It's crazy.
years?
There's so much speculation going on the Central East Side right now. It's ludicrous. And it is a real threat to losing, our manufacturing infrastructure. I don't know how many people were here before the Pearl District was developed, but that used to look like the Central East Side, and there were a lot of creative folks working there. So I think there's a lot of speculation that will be the next Pearl District. There are a lot of land use laws and reasons why that may or may not be able to happen, because we have to preserve a certain amount of industrial land within the urban growth boundary. So, the city's saying that the IG zoning and the type of manufacturing zoning will stay, but there's some talk of office overlays, and which is fine. I think some of the ideas of a policy that keeping a third of it in manufacturing, or protecting certain types of manufacturing infrastructure, doing a really in-depth real estate analysis of where the buildings are that actually have all the infrastructure that manufacturers need would be amazing. But the problem is the market has just, the speculation that's happening from mostly investors outside of Portland. A lot of Portland developers can't even afford to buy buildings in the Central East Side anymore because they've been priced out of their own market. So, so it's a real, and I'm the urban planner by training, graduate school at U of O. And so, I understand mixed use, I understand, high density transit-oriented development, and why, building within urban areas is important, but I think there's a big question on the table of how we preserve manufacturing while we do that, while we meet some of our other goals. It creates an interesting conversation, I guess.
Is it mostly square footage and ground floor plates and large areas that have the room for equipment that you're seeing threatened, or is it the actual old facility with the actual equipment and everything that's now kind of derelict but can be restarted again? Are you piggybacking on an existing use in a building, or are you having to create?
Well, the buildings that I'm looking at are ones that they're larger buildings and they had manufacturing uses before. So they have all the three-phase power and distributed electrical and good lighting and all of that. I can't afford the smaller buildings. The larger buildings you can get much cheaper. And I'm not buying buildings either, just in case you think that I'm a wealthy person. I am not. But also finding enlightened landlords that understand and get this and want to be part of this movement and protecting this movement. So renting really big buildings for cheap and then putting lots of different people in them and sharing that. You can share the brand, you can share a lot of your expense items. So again, it can be a really positive thing for that next phase of growth of keeping, you're sharing electricity, you're sharing space. You could be continuing to share some tooling. You could share an admin and marketing and shipping and receiving and customer service. So that's kind of the next iteration of what we're looking at is how you create like that next space beyond ADX or an incubator space where you can still be in a collective because people really like working around each other. Some people like working in their basements and in isolation, but when they get to a point where they're trying to take something to market, they really want to bounce ideas off of other people and kind of have that support. It's a huge risk to do this, and just having people around you that are there to help support you, I think people feel better about it. But yeah, it is actual square footage and the internal infrastructure within those buildings. If there's an example of some digital media company went into an old warehouse that had a paint booth. They turned the paint booth into a conference room, and it looks really cool, but now all that's lost. And so it's hard to get that back. Once you disconnect all of that and convert it all, it's hard to get it back. So that's kind of the idea, is identifying those and protecting those specifically.
Yeah. Can you describe to us ADX? Where it is and what the size of it, and if there's anything about its location and design that's at the root of its success that is consonant with all of the policies things?
Yeah, ADX, so we're on Southeast 11th between Oak and Stark, so we're on the edge of the Central East Side. I love transition zones, so it's like it's a transition between residential and industrial, so we have access to a lot of neighborhoods on the east side. And that was key in our location. We didn't necessarily want to be down by Water Avenue and that kind of there's a real creative mix of things happening between MLK and the river, but we really wanted to be easily accessible to people, and I think that's been a key, a big key to our success. Negotiating a good lease has helped. Rent and generally rent and employees are your biggest expenses as a business, and so I'm trying to keep my rent down so I can hire more people, because ADX is a very people-intensive business. So we have 14,000 square feet. 2,000 square feet is a co-working facility, and then the wood shop's about 1,500 square feet. Metal shop is about 750 square feet. We have an electronics digital lab that's about 1,000 square feet. We have shared, on the factory floor, people can rent their own workspace, 10 by 10 or 10 by 20 workspace where they can spread out, use their own tools. They'll have their materials stored there. And then the rest of the space is common area where people can spread out and work on their stuff and then put it away. We rent storage within the facility and other kind of office space within the main factory. And then we also have a fabrication department, so people hire us on to build things for them. So I say ADX is come in and do it yourself. You know what you're doing, use the tools, share the space, learn how to do it, take classes, or we'll do it for you. And so we have clients from all over the country that hire us to make things for them. And that's kind of, I think, the magic in the business model. That and also that we're connected to the kind of larger manufacturing economy in Portland. And so we're not just like a tinker space, like a tech shop. We're really trying to give people the resources that they need to scale their business and their products and develop more products and access all the resources that they need. So it's very, very people intensive. I have 10 full-time employees and probably about 20 part-time employees. And a new shop dog, Merle. Yeah.
Can you talk about how you started ADX and some of the stages that you went through?
Sure, yeah, so I was running a space called Art Department, and that was primarily a gallery and event space. And I read about an article, it was about July 2010 in the New York Times about a place called the Third Ward in Brooklyn, New York. They have since closed for a number of reasons. But they had a model that was just really intriguing to me. So running the art department, there was a lot of creative people, filmmakers, painters, theater production people that would just rent out our space to kind of do their thing in. So just kind of acknowledging that people just needed kind of space to spread out and work, and then getting some inspiration from Third Ward, and then I started looking into these different spaces. I found one in Providence called the Steel Yard. I looked at Tech Shop, but they had come to Portland, opened and closed within a year. And so just was really intrigued by this idea of sharing tools and sharing knowledge. There's a lot of places in Portland where woodworkers share space, or motorcycle builders share space, or photographers, or architects, but no place where everything was kind of mashed together. And there were people from different disciplines, different backgrounds. Some of them haven't, gone to college. Some, have been working in the shop all their life. Some have never been in the shop before. So there's just this real kind of creative energy every day. Walking into ADX is new and different, which is great for someone like me because I get bored really easily with things. So walking in and seeing all this new faces and people who have different needs and really are there to kind of, they're investing in themselves and really taking a big risk. So we have a lot of respect for the folks that take that risk and come to the space and spend the money to get their idea off the ground. It was a mistake. Yeah.
In Japan, there is sort of an emerging tendency that the kind of manufacturers want to live very close to their manufacturing facilities, or sort of a rework setting, even by the manufacturers. Have you found any similar tendency here that the manufacturers want to live on top of their facilities, like rework setting?
That's funny. I used to live at ADX illegally. I can say that now because I don't live there anymore. But yeah, I mean, certainly, especially when you're just starting up, it's kind of nice to be that close. But I don't know, I think because of Portland, we live in a great city where, we can live in, beautiful houses and apartments pretty close in to where we work and bike or walk or, take transit to our manufacturing facilities. So that's kind of the nature of protecting essentially side, and other close-in industrial areas is so that, I think the idea of living near where you work is great for a lot of reasons, but, sometimes you kind of want to get away from work. So after 9 months of living at ADX, I've kind of had enough. And, I needed more space or just more physical or whatever, emotional space, I guess, more than anything else. But yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know, this might be just the trend of the newer generation or whatever, but I think people are fine living in smaller spaces, sharing spaces. A lot of Portlanders, there's 12 people living in one house, and so, yeah, I guess it just depends on the person. I don't know if there's necessarily a super hunger for necessarily living where you work, but because of the nature of Portland's great, or Oregon's great planning strategy, it's still possible to live really close to where you work. Yeah.
Are the tenants in your building having problems finding trained entry-level workers?
Well, a lot of the tenants in our building can't afford employees yet, so it's just them, they're doing everything. So what they're looking for is help with marketing and outreach and, sourcing materials and all that kind of stuff. But we definitely, once businesses kind of get up and running and start hiring employees, certainly we hear it a lot from the fashion industry. Production sewers are really hard to come by. There's only one guy in the Portland region that knows how to fix these industrial sewing machines, and he's gonna die soon, like he's old. So, it's like that knowledge isn't being transferred on. So that's another thing that Portland Made is really trying to do is connect that older generation of manufacturers with the new generation of manufacturers to do that knowledge exchange, not only business knowledge, but just manufacturing process and, scaling and all of that. But certainly that's the big cry across the United States is we don't have a skilled labor force doing production work. Portland's been really good at attracting super creative people, but very creative people don't want to do the same motion all day long. And that's what production work is, whether you're sewing or brewing or building furniture. When you start to scale, it's that process. So it's really trying to create that next generation of workers who will do that. And that's the big risk for manufacturers as they grow, is they might leave if they can't find the labor force, or they might need to recruit a labor force from outside of the city. So we're trying to do a lot of that reskilling people who are changing their jobs and wanting to get into manufacturing, or the younger generation. We had like 100 fifth graders come into ADX in May, and they built a giant circuit wall for their school. So they were learning electronics and circuitry and Arduino, and I don't know what that means, but I do actually. It's a good. Do people know what Arduino is? Yeah. Okay. I won't try to explain. Google it. It's an open source microprocessor programming thing. But it's incredible to get kids at that age in there. They see the entrepreneurs working, they can meet people who are running their own businesses. They see that that's actually a path. I didn't know that when I was in school, like I could work for myself. I finally got to it after a long time, after doing nonprofit, for-profit, government, and then I went out on my own and I was like, wow, I love this. I'm broke and it's hard work and I'm tired, but I love it. So I think, I just lost my train of thought. I'm old too. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk about how your business model has changed, or if it has. I guess it sounds like at ADX there's like one tool might have 3 or 4 or 10 different billing rates depending on who's using it, and kind of just like how you balance like a more mission-centered or like supporting the cause, like cutting down barriers to entry, as well as staying viable yourself. I guess that could also be opened up to the work that John or Janet do, as far as like what services do you do for the cause free or at a discount, and then what pays for that as far as some people heavy.
Mm-hmm. Well, the revenue model is definitely very unique. A lot of these spaces are nonprofits. Like I said, I've been in the nonprofit industry and knew very well that I myself personally did not want to run a nonprofit organization. I like to make decisions about things quickly. So that's why it was formed as a for-profit, and the business model is really membership fees is one aspect, classes and education is another aspect, and then our fabrication work for other clients is another aspect. And that to me is kind of where the secret sauce is. We wouldn't really be able to operate if we were just membership driven or just classes driven. And there's something really dynamic about having all 3 of those under one roof. You have people who kind of know what they do, people who are learning what they do, and then professionals building pretty amazing things who really know what they're doing. And then we also do a lot of small run manufacturing. So we've become kind of the beer tap handle production center, which is amazing. Having clients that are brewers are awesome. They bring growlers to meetings. And so Freem, we are now in runs of 700 every 3 months for Freem Brewing. Their tap handles, they're gorgeous, just like their beer. And Bowie in Astoria, Bowie Beer, we're doing a run of 700 for them right now as well. So there's something nice about having that kind of all in one place. People kind of get exposure to the different parts of their process as a business. Did I answer your question? Kind of, sort of. Okay. We're done? One more?
One more, if there is one.
It's interesting that last point you were making about manufacturing part, in a sense, is almost subsidizing, the ability to have a smaller scale growth pieces. And I wonder to what extent Portland has a lot of really large manufacturing still here. A lot of this is close to Seattle, but we're still kind of proximate to Boeing and some of these huge companies. There's a lot of aluminum processing manufacturing hubs here, for example. Huge companies do it. I wonder to what extent Portland, Maine, is there a line of connection? Is there a back and forth where some of those massive companies might start looking at the local small stuff and saying, hey, rather than just letting them come to us, can we start investing in projects like ADX and subsidizing them in a sense so that we have a new group of local producers that might scale?
Yeah, well, there's kind of 2 points in there, yes, and I think some of the larger companies are starting to see that. Leatherman has a R&D, they did, I'm not sure it's around anymore, called, their R&D department is called Free Range PDX, and they're always looking for new product ideas. Leatherman's so cool, they have it in their bylaws that they will stay headquartered in Portland. And so they're looking for new product lines that align with their mission as a company. And when they toured ADX, they were like, wow, this is exactly what we wanted our R&D department to look like, but they just kept it internally. So, Intel and Nike and Zeba, a lot of the bigger companies have, in-house R&D departments, and they're in the basement, and nobody can go in there. Not even all the employees of the company can go in there because it's all proprietary. And I think we're moving into this, an age of kind of open source and open ideas, and we really support that, and collaboration. And yes, there's intellectual property, but there's just a cultural thing that's like, don't steal other people's ideas. It's just like basic things. Your mom should tell you that. Don't steal other people's ideas. And so that's kind of the culture in which we operate at ADX. And then certainly that having industry acknowledge that they're having a workforce training problem, and that places like ADX can help solve that problem for them. They're just, starting to kind of see that, but I think there's been so many years of people trying to build that kind of those workforce training programs that there's just there's not a lot of success. And so I think trying to build some successful stories around training people up for specific industries and kind of help solve 2 problems simultaneously. We have a huge dropout rate in Portland Public Schools. 22,000 kids in the region are falling through the cracks and not being served by our educational institutions. And then we have this big workforce problem, both in manufacturing and in tech with coders. They can't find coders. So there's a huge opportunity to connect the dots and solve multiple problems simultaneously, which is where, that's the kind of area that I like to be in. It's where you can kind of connect some dots and connect some resources and start solving some problems quickly. Again, another reason to be a for-profit. I don't have to run it by a board of directors, it's just trying to build those, and leverage those resources quickly.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.